Hey guys, it's Dr. Justin Marcagiani. Welcome to the Beyond Wellness Radio podcast. Feel free and head over to justinhealth.com. We have all of our podcast transcriptions there, as well as video series on different health topics ranging from thyroid, hormones, ketogenic diets, and gluten. While you're there, you can also schedule a consult with myself, Dr. J, and or our colleagues and staff to help dive into any pressing health issues you really want to get to the root cause on. Again, if you enjoy the podcast, feel free and share the information with friends or family, and enjoy the show. Hey guys, Dr. Justin Marcagiani here. Welcome back to Beyond Wellness Radio. I actually have a patient here today, which is exciting. I love patient stories and testimonials. And welcome to the show, Barbara Diaz de Leon. Barbara's been a patient for a few years. She has an amazing story: Hashimoto's, menopause, osteoporosis, chronic pain, fatigue. And this is just kind of an inspiration story that you can get to the root cause and address these issues. Barbara's also a practitioner now as well. So she works with women and patients that have thyroid issues all over the U.S. too. We'll put Barbara's link down below in the description as well. So if you guys want to reach out to Barb, she will be there for you. Barb, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on the show. It's so nice to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, I know you came in to see me like maybe a little over 2 years ago, coming down that functional medicine kind of pipeline. Tell me about the story before you started utilizing nutrition and functional medicine. You had some chronic health issues. How did that look? Were you kind of knocking on the door of your conventional medical doctor first? How did that kind of story unfold? And how did you make your way kind of down the natural medicine, nutrition, functional medicine path?
Yeah. It was a long journey until I found functional medicine and nutrition and lifestyle things that needed to be done for well over 15 years. It started actually in my early 30s with thyroid issues, and I was prescribed Synthroid, and only a TSH only was checked, and that's a whole nother story. And
Sure.
my labs, my TSH improved, but I still felt very tired. And the doctor would tell me, well, we're all just getting older. Now, okay, I'm in my, earlier 30s and I don't have children. So anybody who's a parent knows like I have no business saying I'm tired,
Right.
at
Oh
30.
yeah, no, I get that.
So that was like issue number one. And then, well, we're all getting tired. Your labs are fine. And, and it went on and on. And then I started having hormone issues, and I'd gotten married in my mid 30s, and my hormones were never checked, my female hormones. And meanwhile, my thyroid is still tanked. And, I'm being told, no, you're okay. Your labs are good. Well, I ended up with a hysterectomy. I had a uterine fibroid embolization ahead of time to, in the effort to have a baby. And then I ended up with a hysterectomy before I was 40. I was 39. And
Wow.
yeah.
That was because of the fibroid?
Yeah. And and I never had any issues, female issues with menstruation or anything like that. It just hit me, and I know that can happen with progesterone. It takes the big dip. Unlike estrogen, where you have the peaks and valleys, the progesterone, some women can really take a big dip, and they're, like 35, 36 years old. So I was starting to get depressed, of course, because of everything that's happening. And then they wanted to treat me at that angle. Well, you're depressed, and well, of course I am, because I'm not getting any answers. And I just knew deep down there was something physical wrong. I was tired all the time. I was starting to check out of family, social events, family gatherings, things like that, coming up with, they weren't really excuses. It was true. I would say I don't feel well, because I didn't. And that was all the time. I had the fatigue was debilitating, body-wide joint pain, mood imbalances, digestive issues, brain fog, and, weight gain. Let's not forget that. Lovely. And so I did, and along the way, I tried different doctors, and, just wasn't getting anywhere. And I just knew somewhere deep down there was something physiological. It wasn't in my head. Yeah. And I'm all about counseling and, getting proper psychiatric help and things like that. 100%, I'm behind that. And I was already going down the counseling road because, I wasn't getting any answers. And of course, along the way, I tried popular weight loss programs to lose weight. And I did lose weight, but I also was still and I was on 2 blood pressure medications just to stay at a high normal blood pressure range. So when I did lose the weight temporarily on these quick weight loss programs, popular programs, it didn't stay off, and I was still sick. Like I was still tired all the time. I was still on blood pressure medicine. So it just was. And then the minute you get off those plans, because they're not sustainable, you're not nourishing your body, I would gain the weight right back and then even more. And so it just kept getting worse and worse. And it's such an invisible disease. Other than the weight gain, everybody's like, well, you look fine. And your family and loved ones my family and loved ones were even saying things like, well, we're all just getting older. You look fine, this, and they meant well, I get it, but I just knew there was something wrong. I knew there had to be more. And then I went the vegan vegetarian route because I thought that's the answer I'm looking for. Yeah. And I was probably for all that time, mostly, I was about 60-70% vegan because I was always striving to be a full-fledged vegan and thinking that was the answer. And I would double down on that. And then when I would finally eat some animal products, it was dairy or eggs. And those, fast forward to now, are like some of the worst things for me for my autoimmune condition. So the proper protein I was having wasn't proper for me. And of course, I end up with osteoporosis in my 40s. And I was having dairy, so it wasn't for lack of drinking milk.
Right.
And, and of course, I wasn't exercising because I was tired all the time. I started to need orthopedic procedures. I had a left shoulder surgery with a rotator cuff tear. I had a C6-7 fusion in my spine, my cervical spine. I had multiple cortisone injections in my hip and my shoulder. And that wasn't from injuries from working out. That was just from like reaching for, a can in the pantry, so I was so inflamed. Wow. And yeah. And, and then the fatigue just got worse and worse. But I just had this small, like, flicker of hope, the small glimmer of hope that there needs to be an answer to this. And I went on with this for over 15 years. Yeah. And actually, what got one of the first things I did, I started to find some podcasts. I actually found yours. It was one of them I started to dive into. Yeah. And then I also Dr. William Davis of the Wheat Belly, he's from my area. I'm in the Milwaukee area. A dietitian that he used to work with, I don't know if he still does, but back then he was working with her. She worked also at a local clinic and she was having a seminar called Delete the Wheat. It was a one-day seminar. And I had no idea what it was about. I didn't even know who Dr. Davis was or anything about his book or anything. And I think his book was coming out about that time or around that time. I don't remember, but I went to this seminar, this training, and it was all about eating meat. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm horrified. I can't stay here. Well, I did stay because I was too shy to get up and leave, but everything was about the paleo nutrition, a paleo template. And but it struck a chord in me. I'm like, you know what, maybe try this, maybe give it a go. And it was really a gift to show up at that seminar, not knowing it was going to be about eating meat. And so I went home, or on my way home, I picked up a package of ground beef and I made taco salad because I wanted to make sure I could really, hide it as much as possible.
Yeah.
Because I was an emotional vegan too. I wasn't a vegan vegetarian.
Right.
It wasn't just about the health. Yeah.
It wasn't just about the nutrition science side. You were invested to the overall cause of it, right?
Oh, I was actually, I had to auto deduct on one of my credit cards for one of the organizations out there that supports it. Yeah. I was full in.
And I know you have lots of cats and pets, so I get it. So
yeah.
I get that.
Yeah. And I grew up a city girl. I didn't grow up on the farm and, there weren't hunters in my family, or anything like that,
Totally.
And then, so I had this taco salad and it was delicious, and I digested it just fine because that's another thing that you're told is that you can't digest meat. We're not made, some say you're not made. I don't know, something about like, you can't digest it. Well, I digested it just fine. I was fine, the next day. Actually, it actually helped with digestive issues with bloating and constipation. And actually, I didn't bloat, and I didn't have any issue at all. But I didn't magically start eating meat all the time after that because I was so ingrained, like you said, emotionally. So I had to, watch a lot of YouTube videos of ex-vegans of why they converted. And this was about a year-long process, and during that time I started to find, podcasts like yours. And then, I started to think, gosh, maybe there is something to this. I didn't know about autoimmunity. I had Hashimoto's. I didn't know I had it at the time. I didn't know about like removing gluten and how, when those molecules get through your intestinal wall from leaky gut, how that, looks like the thyroid tissue and it attacks it. I didn't know any of that. And I adopted that kind of eating, along with other things too. I did a lot of mindset work, lifestyle things like with stress management, and also some balanced movement. I'm very big on all four pillars: lifestyle, mindset, nutrition, and movement for to achieve health goals. And but that nutrition was the first part I went after, and I had really good results with that. And wasn't everything I needed. I needed to get on proper thyroid medication, but yeah, it was quite the journey for sure.
That's really great. It's really inspirational. I mean, out of the gate, you get people that are told, hey, you have these issues, and some people resign and say, this is just aging.
Mhm.
There's nothing I can do with it. And I'm going to just try to manage the symptoms with this medication or that medication, maybe numb my brain out, take an SSRI, and just resign to this is my path. And some people say, you know what? I don't quite accept it. Obviously, the internet's here. There's case studies and there's all kinds of articles and podcasts of other ways to approach this. And so obviously there was something in your brain, in your personality that said, no, I'm not going to accept it. What do you think that was
Yeah,
that made you just not willing to accept that's all I can do?
I just deep down, I'm just like, this can't be it. I
Hmm.
used to be so happy and vibrant and enjoyed life. And, it can't flip the switch like this. And actually, the more the people would say to me, like family members, well, we're all tired. It's like, well, they don't get it. Like, I'm drinking like 3 pots of coffee a day, and I'm still like really tired. And it was just something in me that just said, no, keep going, keep looking. You can't, it's not, and then of course it got with the depression, it got really dark. And it was one of those things. I think when we get big obstacles like this in our life, we respond one or two ways: either, give it your all or you give in. And there was something in me that gave in, and I'm just like, just don't. I mean, it went on for a long time. So I kind of surprised myself sometimes, but I just wasn't accepting it. It was just like, just because something is common doesn't make it normal. Just because everyone in there is on, my age on medications, that doesn't make it normal. Like, it's not normal to have high blood pressure. And for me, like with the blood pressure, a lot of people are like, well, you lost weight, so of course you're off your blood pressure medicines. No, remember, I lost weight before and I was still
Yeah.
on them. That
Still
had
on it. Right.
nothing to
You're still
do with
inflamed.
it. Yeah. In
Right.
fact, the beta blocker that I was on, that was a little tougher to get off of. Eventually I did. But yeah, it was about getting my body well, at the cellular level.
Yeah, when you look at it like this, right? I kind of always had the mindset because I remember being in high school listening to Tony Robbins. I was a big Tony Robbins guy early on in my adolescence. And there was one quote he said was success leaves footprints. And so I always would look at people who are healthy and be like, well, what are they doing? Or look at people who are successful in their relationships or finances. What are they doing? And I would just simply look at and just try to model behavior. Like, what's the Pareto principle? What are the 20% of things they're doing that are helping them get their health, get their wealth, get their emotions, whatever the trait I'm looking at is, what are the core things that are helping them the most? So I'd always would look at things from that lens. And then when I worked in a surgical center in college, helping these surgeons outposition patients and things like that, I would see, one, there wasn't a curiosity of how to prevent things such as diabetic infections, diabetic limb issues where the limb would go gangrene. There wasn't a thought process of how to get in front of it. It was, let's just treat the damage and the end result. And then I would look at the people doing these procedures. They were out smoking at the butt hut, drinking sodas. They weren't healthy people.
Mhm.
So I would always look at that and be like, okay, but they're just, the end stage is managing disease, right? Yet society had kind of like cast this crown on them, like, oh, well, but you are a health expert, you know it all, but they don't. And I would see that, and it always would conflate me and say, okay, well, who are the people that really have information that are trying to go upstream, that understand nutrition, understand ways that we can fix this stuff from a root cause versus manage symptoms downstream? And most people kind of think that the average medical doctor has that kind of training, but they really don't. They're really symptom management with drugs, disease management with drugs, and or surgery. And so I think it's important to have that kind of mindset. And then looking at your situation, you have Hashimoto's or you have all these different things, right? They're just going to try to get your TSH good. They're not going to manage the inflammation. They're not going to manage the antibodies. They're not going to manage any of the nutrient deficiencies. We know a vegan diet, for instance, very low in protein, very low in certain iron, B12, B vitamins, core nutrients, probably very high in carbohydrate, a lot of anti-nutrients. So if you have gut permeability issues, all those grains and legumes and dairy, and then in your situation, even eggs, were just driving more gut permeability, which was then exacerbating the autoimmune issue and inflammation. Is that correct?
Mhm. That is spot on. Yes, 100%. And yeah, it's it's a pretty scary road out there. I remember I was getting I think it was one of the tests I was getting from conventional medicine in my 40s. And I remember the tech, it was a bone density test. I was for the
Mm.
osteopenia. And she said, she saw I was on, I had a thyroid issue because, of course, I was on Synthroid. She's like, well, who's your endocrinologist? And I said, I don't have one. And then she said, oh, I just had my thyroid removed. She said, I have Hashimoto's and I had to get my thyroid removed. And I remember thinking to myself, well, I want the name of your endocrinologist because I don't want to go. Like, I just knew like that wasn't
Right.
the route I
Right.
wanted to go. I'm like, and then she had a
Yeah.
horrible experience. Her throat collapsed. She was in ICU. Like she's, and it was just like, oh my gosh. And, and I say this with love, but she didn't look well. Like you could see it in their eyes,
Yeah.
and, I can actually spot that. Like when I see people like my age, it's like, oh my gosh, you just don't look well. You just, just don't look, well at all. And, yeah. And then back to your question about like what sparked me to keep going. When I did start, happen to come across podcasts, like listening to like people that you would interview and stuff
Yeah.
about talk about their clinical experience and how they turn people around. That was helpful too, so it does, it's always, a big message I have is keep going, keep searching, don't give up because your answer's there. And, you know, um, even if I actually had other functional medicine providers before, and they actually, one of them stopped turning over the rocks to look and
Yeah.
he started writing down on his prescription pad, books recommended for me to get. Cause again, back to it's in my head kind of thing. He didn't quite say that. And I know he meant well, but it was just like,
Yeah.
so just keep going. Don't give up. Your health is worth it. I mean, you have one life to live. Like, don't, lose your shot at this.
And what got you through the vegetarian vegan type of, because you were really connected to that diet. How did you make that switch? Was it just the wheat belly?
Yeah.
That the seminar that you saw with Dr. William Davis, was that the big thing, or was there
Yeah.
something else that you did on top of that?
I think it was the timing of that, and then running into a couple of podcasts like yours, like
Mhm.
with that, and because I was fully in on all the vegan things, and I was all big on. Also, like my big focus was preventing cancer at the time too, because I thought, oh gosh, there's so much cancer in my family, and and they're all saying do the eat a plant-based diet and things like that, and I think it was just the timing of it. And I'm like, what do I have to lose at this point? And that's another thing. When you get to the bottom, sometimes it's just like, why not try it? What do I have to
Yeah.
lose?
Oh
Like,
yeah.
why
When
not?
I
Why
make
not?
these, because I've had hundreds of these conversations, so I've tried to distill the vegan type of misinformation. I try to distill it to patients in a minute or so. So here's this my general spoop. I put the conversation on two sides: the emotional and the science side.
Mhm.
So first off, when you just look at nutrients, the nutrient density in high quality animal products is very high. I mean, from a B vitamin standpoint, B12, iron, it's much higher than on the plant based side. That's number one. And if you look at just protein, a lot of times vegans will hide behind relative protein versus absolute protein. So you'll see people say, "Oh, like kale is, it's like 20% protein, but it's like very little calories." So they'll hide behind the okay. So if you have something that's 5 calories and it's 1 calorie of protein, okay, it's 20% protein, right? But it's like, well, the calories aren't that high. So when you look at absolute protein, like let's look at gram per gram. Okay, great. How many cups of kale do you have to get the amount of protein, let's say in 6 to 8 ounces of grass-fed beef? Well,
Mhm.
it's about 14 cups. Okay.
Mhm.
Oh, so now that becomes really difficult to actually look at animal products. How do you get protein? Why does that matter? Because your bones are half protein. So if you're dealing with osteoporosis and you're trying to help your neurotransmitters heal, and your hormones usually come from cholesterol and protein-based sources, you're not getting those building blocks. And so when you just look at it as like, there's that house, I need lumber. I need to get this lumber there and frame that house. But if I don't have the lumber, I can't frame it. Well, it's the same thing with high quality animal products. You need these raw material and these building blocks. And then when you look at B vitamins and iron and those kind of things, and methylation and amino acids, especially sulfur ones, you just don't get it. Now, the other
Mhm.
argument I say is on the kind of more emotional side, if you're worried about killing animals, then let's try to consume the most amount of calories,
Mhm.
most amount of nutrients per death. Because
Mhm.
the idea that just because I eat vegan, vegetarian, I'm not taking any life, it's not true. When those combines run through, and whether you're harvesting wheat or corn or anything else, there's gophers, there's snakes, there's moles, there's all kinds of things, rabbits, squirrels, there's so many things that get caught up in that. And so then you're making a value judgment saying, well, that cow, because it's bigger, his life is more important than that squirrel. or
Mhm.
that snake, right? And so then, okay, so then you're going to take life in this process no matter what. The question is, how do we get the most amount of nutrition for the least amount of deaths? And so I try to sell people on the emotional side, then I try to sell people on the nutrient density side. And then, you can also go more into the, okay, what about the autoimmune foods like the gluten
Mhm.
and some of the, nuts or seeds, or in your situation, kind of more of the eggs. So you were able to kind of jump on that. And let's kind of dovetail into the Hashimoto's area,
Mhm.
because you go see your conventional medical doctor, they're probably only just running TSH. Did they
Mhm.
run thyroid antibodies? Did they give you any options to deal with the Hashimoto's and the antibodies specifically?
No, no. One time they did run a T4 and they're like,
Oh,
yeah, and they're like, "Oh, that looks a little
good
low,"
for
but they
them.
didn't do anything about it, and if you're not converting T4 to T3, well, it
Mm,
doesn't kind of matter, I guess, what
right.
your T4 is. And I wanted to touch on your explanation. That's such a great explanation about the combines and things like that, because that's
Yeah.
actually what got my attention. Thinking of the rodents and things like that, along the way too, and then yeah, 100%. And then, when you're going, and then when you're not eating the satiating protein like that, you're eating way more, the wrong grains and carbohydrates. And then,
Yes.
of course, in menopause with women, we're less insulin sensitive automatically. So, and I forgot to
Right.
mention, I had blood sugar imbalances too.
Yes.
Like before, I would get so faint. I'd never fainted because there's always a way to get a Snickers bar or something like that. Like I'd
Right.
always eat, but I would have blood sugar imbalances so often, and that is just not normal. And then when menopause hit, it was even worse. So, it's just being a menopausal woman alone is a good reason to eat a blood sugar balancing diet. Frankly, I think
Yes.
everybody should, but
Yes.
but especially women in my group, I'm 59 and it's like I feel fantastic, but I'm sure it's because I'm, eating the proper diet.
Yeah, and that being said, too, the average vegan combination of protein to make it complete, right? Think of rice or
Mhm.
beans or quinoa and lentils or whatever.
Mhm.
Typically, you're getting about 70% starch to about 15 to 25% protein.
Mhm.
So usually 15 grams per about 15 grams of protein
Mhm.
to about
Mhm.
70 grams of carbohydrate. And so if you need 100 grams of protein, you're going to be eating 400 to 500 grams of carbohydrate. And for most people,
Mhm.
that's probably going to be too much for them. Now, you can get away with it with soy, but then you have all of the other issues with that, the phytoestrogens and the
Oh.
trypsin inhibitors and some of the anti-nutrients, or you can get away with it with like protein powders. But now you're kind of going into a more artificial realm.
Mhm.
And, that's not something that we've had for a long period of time. And it's not, you can't really get it from food directly. So you can do it from soy,
Mhm.
or you can do it from protein powders. And so the people that do the best on a vegan vegetarian diet really get the protein powders going, and
Mhm.
they really get good fats from your olive, your avocado, and they do a lot of coconut to maximize the
Mhm.
saturated fat. So if you're going to do it right, or better, or the best you can do, then you have to really play those avenues, because you'll get a lot of carbohydrates on the backside. But go ahead on that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. When you brought up soy, that just always gets my attention because one of the popular diets I went on, they have their own foods like snacks and things like that, and most of them, or a lot of them, are based on soy protein isolate. So you're getting protein, and it was one of those plans where you eat every couple hours, so you're always hungry. It was always like looking at the time, like, is it time to eat? Is it time to eat? And the soy protein isolates, I was eating that mainly for protein. And then I would have like soy, milk lattes and things like that, thinking I was doing the right thing. And it was just making all my symptoms worse, not to mention my gut
Right.
permeability. And I want to mention too about the neurotransmitters with gut health. It was like a
Yes.
veil was lifted. That depression, a veil was lifted. Like, oh my gosh, it was like the
Yeah.
seas parted, when my gut was healed. I'm not kidding. Like, wow, what a difference with
Yeah.
that. But yeah, that soy is a really bad news, man.
I
Yeah.
find the people that do best on a vegan vegetarian diet, you see them, right? They tend to be, their somatotype tends to be more of an ectomorph, right? These are the marathon runners. These are the people that are always biking. When they consume carbohydrate, they're just like, go, 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 go. Their
Mhm.
body sees carbs and they get energized. Most people, when they get that amount of carbs dumping, they get tired and sleepy. And so I always look at people and say, well, not every diet, like if this was truly a bad diet for everyone, why do some people thrive? And so I
Mhm.
always like to just, kind of distill, why would someone do good on this diet? Why
Yeah.
would someone not? Why would someone do
Mhm.
better on this diet? Why would they not? And so I always like to highlight that, so
Mhm.
we're not overly dogmatic. This is
Mhm.
how someone would do good on this diet, but I think they would do better over
Mhm.
here. Or
Yeah.
why does someone, when they switch from a vegan to a Adding in meat, why do they feel worse sometimes? Well,
Mhm.
a lot of times their hydrochloric acid levels are shut down and they can't handle the protein breakdown. Now, in your situation, when you transition to adding more protein, talk about the hydrochloric acid. It sounded like you did pretty good without even
Yeah.
supplementing it out of the gates.
Yeah, I did. I think what it was, I felt good. I didn't feel nearly as good as I do now, of course. Like,
Mhm.
but just that little bit of improvement with getting the proper nutrition just helped in itself. I do take a little bit of hydrochloric acid now just to optimize my
Mhm.
nutrition, and as I get older too, just being over 50, the hydrochloric
Mhm.
acid is going to change in itself, and then I had so many years of that. So I'm all about optimizing what I've got. I don't take it with every meal, but it is much better. But I did okay with it, but I wasn't anywhere near where I needed to be. But it was like a small light switch went on. It wasn't a complete one, but going from feeling so tired and lethargic and having bloating and all the digestive issues every day, and you know having that food and not having those symptoms. When I was all primed for it, I was convinced I'm going to have trouble with digesting this and all that. I even went into it with a bad mindset, and that didn't bother me at all. But that hydrochloric acid is definitely so important. And just to your point about like being dogmatic and things like that, I'm always like, hey, if your diet's working for you and you've got great markers and you feel great, now I would prefer that they're feeling great long term, because you could do something
Right.
short term and feel good for a little bit.
Right.
But if you have years, of feeling great, and like I know somebody who is a vegan, and I believe they are not like a quote. I don't want to say it, I don't know how to say it, but like where they cheat, where they go off of it. They are like dogmatic about it actually, but they look great and they do well, and they've been doing well for a long time. So I don't know, but I don't think that's common. I
Also,
just
I've had this conversation so many times because most people, they come into a vegan vegetarian diet from watching Game Changers, watching
Mhm.
Forks Over Knives. So
Yeah.
they've had this really bunch of propaganda thrown at them, and they changed their diet radically. So there were lots of soda, a lot of processed stuff, a lot of
Mhm.
inflammatory food, and
Mhm.
then they're starting to eat more vegetables. They're starting to eat more avocado and olive oil. They're starting to have more salads. Maybe they're having more nuts and seeds. Maybe they're throwing in some pea protein and coconut milk. So they were like, oh my God, this diet made me feel great. And I'm like, well, was it the diet that made you feel great, or was it the exclusion of all of
Right.
these crummy,
Mhm.
anti-inflammatory or pro-inflammatory, nutrient-deficient foods? And so I
Mhm.
always tell patients, when you make a diet change, think about it. Is it the new food that you're doing, or is it the
Mhm.
exclusion of this crummy food? And then is there a better food that we can plug in that would be even better than
Yeah.
what you're eating now? So you got to look at it from both sides of the fence. So, and for
Mhm.
you, it's really important. And for most women, it's really important because of the protein, the
Mhm.
neurotransmitters, and the building blocks. That's important. Also, the iron, especially if you're of cycling age where you're having that menstrual flow every month, the iron is a big deal. And the
Mhm.
B12, especially if you're having methylation issues, MTHFR, you may not get enough of it in just leafy greens. So then, okay, so we have this high level of antibodies, this Hashimoto is going on. They're probably just recommending what, like a synthetic T4, just trying to make your
Mhm.
TSH look pretty.
Right.
How did your antibodies look? What were they even saying about that? And how are your T3 numbers downstream? Not just TSH or T4, but how did everything look downstream with your T3 levels, which is your active thyroid hormone?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I don't even remember anybody checking my T3
Mhm.
and, at
How
all,
about
or
antibodies though?
anybody's. They did get checked once, and I
Hmm.
was told, and they were super high, like, upper almost 1,000. And
Wow.
they said, that this just means you'll need to take more and more thyroid medicine, as you go on. Like, there's nothing you could do about it. You don't need to do anything about
Yeah.
it. And it's like right out the gate, the antibodies, I mean, that's inflammation. And, that's why I'm all about like having a nutrient dense, blood sugar balancing,
Yeah.
anti-inflammatory, gut healing diet,
Sure.
and there was not any mention of that at all, like about how inflammation can be. Even, I have a strong family history of cancer and cardiac disease. And you would think that inflammation, because even conventional doctors agree inflammation's a problem, chronic inflammation, that is. And it's like that's a sign of inflammation. And there's many things you can do, even like stress management, can inflame, not having managed stress can inflame you. And so not one thing there, the answer was for, the future was you'll just need more and more medication. And if that person who I talked about, that technician with my bone density test, I'm sure that's what happened to her. Her thyroid just got destroyed, and she's probably eating the same nutrition plan, and same having the same lifestyle that she had before. And that's another point too. It's like I did have a period of time where I thought I could supplement my way out, of certain things. And this was at the beginning of my transformation, even before, I would try to take B12 and the top quality, and I was still tired all the time. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And, but even when, I did run into this too when I was properly diagnosed and treated. I did think, I did slip into the thing of like, well, if I take all these supplements, I'll be fine. I can still like get away with, staying up late all the time, not managing stress, not moving my body in a proper way, in a balanced way. And no, you need to do your part, on the daily. So to me, it's a two-part thing: get properly diagnosed and treated, and get on the right thyroid hormone replacement therapy. And, for sure, for starters, but then you still need to do your part to live optimally. I'm all about, now I'm like on the opposite side. I'm dogmatic about living your best life you can, being your best version of yourself.
And you did better adding in the kind of a full spectrum thyroid glandular with T3 in it, right? Versus just the T4 alone, correct?
Right. Yep. That's right. And I
do you talked about the fact that they said that you're going to need more and more thyroid over time. And I think that they're implying that your immune system is beating up your thyroid. And so what function you have will continue to drop and drop and drop every single year, because we're not getting to the underlying cause of why your immune system's attacking it. Plus, when your cells are inflamed, that hormone docking in and binding to a receptor site and having a nuclear response is going to be dampened, because when there's inflammation, things aren't going to work and connect biochemically appropriately. Yeah. And then just to kind of highlight, so we have kind of the inflammation thing not being addressed. So as we get the inflammation down and the thyroid's not being as beaten up and attacked and sore and swollen, now we have better hormone production. And then we have better hormone binding because there's less inflammation. And then, even like, your average person who's like paleo, they're going to be like, oh, well, eggs are great. And I love eggs. I think they're great for most people. But in your situation, they weren't. And so you started off kind of more on an autoimmune diet to just even cut out more of these foods that could be an issue, like eggs or nuts or seeds or even butter. Talk more about kind of going from maybe a whole foods paleo to more of an autoimmune shift, which is a little bit more of a drastic diet change.
Yeah. Yeah. When I first started eating animal products, or, I would still eat eggs, and I wasn't feeling better. I mean, I was feeling improved because I was getting proper nutrition from like the ground beef. But I still wasn't feeling very improved. And actually, I have to thank, people like yourself with the podcast, having guests. Like I remember listening a long time ago, yet, Eileen Laird on your podcast from Phoenix Helix. And I remember thinking, wow, red peppers can do that. I mean, I was eating bell peppers all the time. And
you had lots of joint pain and the nightshade connection there too.
Yep. Tomatoes and lots. It's here in the summertime in the Midwest. Tomatoes are everywhere. Everyone's giving them to you and they taste great. And they're a real problem for me. And, so I was eating all these things and they're, I mean, if you can handle them, they do have wonderful nutrient profiles for sure, but, so I'm not, definitely eat them if you can, and then white potatoes too is another thing. So I did transition to sweet potatoes and, it was much better choice for me, for sure. But it was actually listening to people and trying different things. And I thought, well, let me give this a go. I was already, convinced about how the paleo diet, the paleo template was healthy. And, but I wasn't quite where I needed to be. I was definitely improved, but I wasn't where I needed to be yet, for sure. No. I think that my biggest improvement was more like my brain. Like I started to think more clearly so I could actually pay attention to these podcasts and things like that. And so just learning from other people on that. And so I started to dive into that and it's been a huge blessing, no doubt about it.
Getting your T3 levels into a more therapeutic range. Giving your body the nutrients to activate your T4. Doing things to get those antibodies down. And then what about your gut? What about any infections driving some of the inflammation or driving some of that antibody response?
Yeah. And then, with working with you too, we've done, the GI map and things like that, and it treated gut infections, and it just, helped.
Do you recall which ones you had? Did you have H. pylori?
I did. Yeah.
Yeah. H. pylori is a common one with Hashimoto's.
Yeah, I did have that. Yeah. That was early on. Yep. And it was one of the first tests that you did. And, and getting that treated. So it was just like, so even though I felt better and better along the way, I wasn't quite where I needed to be, but compared to what I was, I felt fantastic. It's kind of like when you feel great, you don't realize how bad you were feeling. And so there was like
Mhm.
different phases of it over time. With me, I think my transformation, I would say, took 2-3 years all in total. I mean, I'm still like always working on optimizing my nutrition and things like that. But I didn't go like right to autoimmune protocol on day one. So, that I'm sure would have made a difference.
And that may not be something that someone has to do forever. It's always
Mhm,
good to do at least a 30-day
mhm,
elimination provocation where you pull it out and then you very methodically add it back in and see how
mhm,
you feel regarding cognitive, emotional,
mhm,
gut, joint, inflammation. Just see how you feel. And that's usually a good starting point for most people where you pull it out, even if you don't notice much. Usually when you add it back in, if it's been out for a month or so, you're
mhm,
going to notice something if there is a problem. So that's always a good
mhm,
kind of first step as well.
mhm,
Also, you being menopausal, lower estriol, lower estrogens, lower progesterones can also have an impact on your
mhm,
immune system as well. There's a lot of data on that a lot of these hormones that were there when you were of cycling age,
mhm.
or if you had a hysterectomy. Was your hysterectomy complete or just partial?
Partial.
Okay,
And
so you still had the ovaries then producing
mhm,
some of that. So as you went into
mhm,
menopause in your late 40s, early 50s, now
mhm,
that hormonal drop happened, talk
mhm.
about what happened with some of these symptoms as you were cycling, as you went into menopause. What happened to some of your health issues?
Yeah, everything, when I first entered into menopause, everything kind of exploded and magnified, in terms of the symptoms, and then added in hot flashes. And so when I would eat, refined sugar products, it had a profound effect, I mean, not just with the imbalanced blood sugar issues that I had, but with the night sweats and things like that. It's just, everything just seemed to be magnified. I was just definitely gained more weight, of course, and my brain fog was even worse. My brain fog got to a point where I actually had the competency testing done. And, because I wanted a baseline, because I thought, oh my gosh, am I going to get, I used to have to write at my corporate job note when something was super important. I put it in my electronic calendar, write it down on a hard copy calendar, and put a post-it note on my screen. So I was able to get away with it. Like no one picked up on my things, and I understand like this happens with a lot of thyroid people. They leave their jobs. Like I heard of someone who was a CPA and they kept messing up the numbers. They had to quit because they didn't want to get fired. And it's a real thing. It's serious. So all of that got magnified all the more. The blood sugar imbalance was huge, with menopause too. And that's when, all the timing is everything. I was really fortunate, to switch everything around at that time. But that's also a big part of my message too, that, you can turn it around. You don't have to. I look at people who are around my age and like I said, I could see in their eyes sometimes it's like, I have to restrain myself. I almost feel like, did you try this or that or anything? I mean, you could turn this around, you definitely can.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing when you kind of draw a line between conventional medicine and functional medicine, and conventional medicine does really wonderful when there's a lot of acute traumatic situations, but when it's
Mhm,
chronic and you're
mhm,
just managing symptoms and you're not getting to the root cause, it's tough. You're going to be chasing
mhm,
your tail. And the big thing is there's an accountability factor. When you're on the conventional medicine side, it's usually you point to aging or you point to genetics. That's why
mhm,
I'm in the position that I'm in.
mhm,
Where when you go more on the functional medicine side, it's like, no, I'm accountable because I'm doing things that are driving inflammation in my body.
mhm.
It's these things. I'm going to manage my emotions better, my sleep better. I'm going to
Yep.
manage my diet better, my digestion, infections, lifestyle, movement. And so you're taking accountability. Where on the
Mhm.
other side, it's like aging, genetics, and it's just okay. That's it. Take this pill, and I'm going to just I'm going to just offload all my responsibility. And so it's tough taking the step that you take because it really takes you having to be in the driver's seat and own why you're in the position that you're in.
I love that you said that about the ownership. I love that. That's one of my favorite things, that I do for myself to keep myself motivated and going. Take responsibility and ownership. Do what you need to do. Like even recently, I had to shift my sleep schedule. I've had trouble with sleep,
Right. We talked about that.
and I just switched, which means I had to switch my beloved workout schedule. I was working out
Yeah.
first thing in the morning, very early, and it
Very
just
early. I don't know how you did
yeah,
that.
I know. And so, like after this interview, normally I would have already worked out by now, and but I'm going to go work out, and it's like and it's already a relatively newer switch for me. But you do what you need to do. Like it's like
Yep.
well, it's kind of like you're going to rise up and you're going to make it happen because, my workouts are important. Well, just for all the obvious reasons that workouts are important, but I'm also training for a bikini competition. So
Oh, that's great.
yeah. And so,
Amazing.
yeah, yeah, hopefully that'll happen in 6 months. And, so I'm working towards that. So, the workouts are really important, for sure. But you do what you need to do. You take ownership. And you are. I mean, I understand there's some things that are out of your realm, and and I'm not saying everything I do is gonna, I never say cure or anything like that. It's about just managing what you can, control what you can, and there's a lot you can control. For sure. Like you can learn, like if you're living with someone who's stressing you out, you can, there's lots of books on boundaries. There's lots of things you can do for mindset and things like
Yep.
that. Obviously, if you're in a dangerous situation, unsafe, you get out of it. But I'm talking about like just someone who's just getting on your nerves,
Mhm.
all the time. There's you have to rise up and you have to confront that.
Yep.
If you're a timid, shy person, you need to deal with that because your health will pay for that. And your immune system, really is precious. And back to like the immune system problems with Hashimoto's and antibodies, I wanted to mention too, I got pneumonia like 4 or 5 times in my life and really bad. And I don't have any like genetic immune system thing, going on because they checked a lot of that stuff. And it boiled down to these antibodies. I'm convinced of it because I don't get that anymore. I rarely get sick, actually.
Yeah, your immune system was so busy attacking itself
Mhm,
and stressing
mhm.
itself out
Yeah.
that it didn't have the reserves to go after other types of
And
infections or
then
viruses. So that
and
that
then
makes sense.
and then I was on so many antibiotics. A lot of times the antibiotics they gave me didn't work. Then they would put me on Levaquin, and so like my gut was a wrecked mess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it makes
Yeah.
sense.
Mhm.
Well, you have a great story, Barb. You've taken full accountability yourself. I call it the wounded healer story. Most practitioners, they come from a place of having that aha moment, getting themselves better, improving their health. And they're like, all right, I want to take this to the everyday person. So that's kind of, I have a similar story. It sounds like you have a similar story. I think it's very inspiring. I think a lot of the listeners can connect with that. I think you provide a lot of hope, especially to that, that demographic, that woman that's going into that menopausal kind of time frame, has the Hashimoto's, and they just aren't given a lot of options by their conventional medical doctor to address the issue. So I love that. Anything else you want to leave the listeners with regarding, any other key things that helped you that you want to highlight?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, small steps for the win. Okay. Do small steps. I mean, if you could do
Mhm.
everything all at once, great. But for it to be sustainable, do small steps over a period of
Mhm.
time so things become a habit, because once it's a habit then it's your life. So the things like the movement, the drinking
Yep.
water, I know avoiding sugar is hard. I was a sugar addict. I used to go to our local grocery store. They have all the bakery goods in the front, and I used to buy it, eat it on the way home, and then throw the container in the garbage bin in the garage so my husband wouldn't see it, or if he was in the garage I would hide it under the seat. I mean, I was an addict. That's what addicts do. So like just small things, on the daily, and give yourself a lot of grace along the way. Fall down 7, get up 8. Like just
Yep.
keep going. And um, and then if you are a menopausal woman, and you're having hot flashes and all these issues, man, stop that sugar. I'm telling you, that is,
Mhm.
a one of the first things I'd recommend, 100%. But yeah, keep going. Small steps for the win, so things can become a habit, and and you can do this. I did it. You can do it. Yeah, and my clients do it too.
That's excellent. Very good. So, Barb, you see patients or you see clients worldwide now as well. Why don't you give everyone your website? We put it down below in the description. So if you guys are
Mhm.
driving, don't worry, click down below. We'll have that link there. You're giving away a free recipe guide as well. And then you
Mhm.
have opportunity. People want to work with you kind of on the coaching side. You have that. Where's the best place for listeners to find you?
Yeah. My website is Daily Wellness for You. So DAILYWELLNESS for you.com. And on that, you can get a primal meal plan or a paleo meal plan. That you can check out. It's 7 days worth of recipes. So you can see all the wonderful foods you can have, and there's no gluten or dairy in it. And you can contact me for one-on-one coaching. And I have long one-on-one coaching programs, but I also offer short 28-day programs throughout the year. And the 28-day program, actually, I wrote a book about it and it just got released. It's called Feel Great in 28.
Love it.
And yeah, you can get it on Amazon. Whoops, here it is. Feel Great in 28. Yep. And yeah, that just got released. And, but And also too, I have a free Facebook group that I love to serve in and give trainings on and things like that, just so people can feel great. I want to mitigate suffering. That's my thing. Like, don't wait as long as I don't want people to go through over 15 years like I did. And, there's a lot you can do to mitigate that suffering, for sure, and live your best life.
Yeah, and Barb, you've been a phenomenal patient. You're educated, you lived it, you're authentic. And so you're going to be able to help lots of people. So congratulations for all that you're doing.
Well, thank you for all that you do. Thank you so much. I appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Awesome, Barb. All right, link down below, guys, if you want to go and get access to more Barb's great info. Barb, thanks so much. You have an awesome day. It was great seeing you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.